Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in the House of Commons right now this afternoon and will be addressing Canadian Parliament in person for the first time. Let's listen in live.
Okay. Your Excellency, Prime Minister, Président Gagné, party leaders, honorable parliamentarians, distinguished guests, bienvenue à cet événement extraordinaire.
The second joint address to Parliament by His Excellency Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine.
On behalf of my colleagues, we are honored for your visit. As we come together under one roof, we take a moment to celebrate the friendship and shared values of our countries. We celebrate our people and the history of cooperation between Canada and Ukraine. And we celebrate solidarity.
Allow me to now invite the Right Honourable Prime Minister to take the floor.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentarians, honored guests, friends, we gather today at a pivotal point in history. This is a time of incredible uncertainty. Attacks upon the rules-based international order threaten to upend the peace and prosperity that have been the bedrock of Canada's success. This is a challenge on a generational scale, a challenge that history will judge us on. A challenge we must confront with lion-hearted courage, and the world can find no better inspiration than our friend here with us in our house today, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and his wife, the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska. 1 year, 6 months, and 29 days ago, Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, unleashing a campaign of violence and brutality that has left countless dead and forced millions to flee. But for 1 year, 6 months, and 29 days, the people of Ukraine have defended their homes, their language, and their freedom to choose their own future. They have fought back with a courage that has inspired the world, and they have been led by President Zelenskyy, a great champion of democracy. Monsieur le Président Zelenskyy,
President Zelenskyy, in March of last year, you addressed our Parliament virtually. In June of this year, I addressed your Parliament in Kyiv, the Verkhovna Rada, where I was touched to see so many Canadian flags in the chamber. Today, you are able to be here in person to speak about the fight for your democracy and your freedom. And you do it to remind us that in your country, Russia continues its assault, and Ukrainians are sacrificing their lives.
Monsieur le Président Zelenskyy,
President Zelenskyy, we speak regularly. We've spoken about what is happening at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station and the environmental destruction caused by Russia's tactics. We've spoken of the human toll, children kidnapped, and people who are being taught to hate.
I've seen Putin's destructive evil firsthand during my visits to Ukraine since the war began. I saw it in the bombed-out neighborhoods, in the bridges reduced to twisted steel, in the abandoned homes. I also saw it in the faces of your citizens. They walked down the street, sat in cafes, daily life seemingly persisting, but with everyone I spoke to, I saw in the backs of their eyes the weight of this war, the fear for their fellow Ukrainians on the front lines, the anxiety that another air raid siren would go off at any moment. the loss of a loved one. The toll of this war on the mental health and well-being of Ukrainians is immeasurable. I know, First Lady Zelenskyy, you are dedicated to the work to address this. So today we are providing funding to support mental health care in Ukraine as we continue to applaud your tremendous leadership in these difficult times. When rules-based orders crumble, so much is lost. One example of how this breakdown manifests is the horrifying, preventable hardship as Russia blocks grain exports, worsening hunger and starvation among the world's most vulnerable people. President Zelenskyy, you and the Ukrainian people are holding the rules-based order in the balance. You are on the front lines, not just of the fight for Ukraine, but in the fight for the kind of future we are all going to be living in.
Rules matter. Following the Second World War, the bloodiest and deadliest conflict humanity has ever known, the whole world's nations agreed on a common set of rules and principles to reestablish peace. For 3/4 of a century, these rules have allowed historic prosperity. They have fostered trade, given citizens the necessary confidence to invest in their future, and helped millions of people escape poverty. There isn't a single place that hasn't known prosperity thanks to peace.
But what Putin has done is a break with civilization. It is a violation of our common humanity. It is an attempt to disassemble the rules-based order that protects our freedom. It is a move to weaken democracy and assert autocracy. Putin governs with deception, violence, and repression. He imprisons his own people and stirs up ugly sentiments of xenophobia and racism. But his imperial delusions in Ukraine have been met with a fierce defense. A defense that is not just strong because of the support from friends around the world, but because those who fight for their freedom will always fight with their whole hearts.
That is why we must all fight by all possible means. We must speak out loud and clear against violations of national sovereignty and affronts to international law. Violations to the rules-based international order must be denounced, and aggressors must be held responsible for their actions. That has always been our government's position. That is why, without exception, we oppose authoritarian states, and we stand by those who defend international law, universal human rights, and the ability of all peoples to decide on their own future. That is why we remained faithful to our principles when Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor were arbitrarily detained by China.
There are countries that are bending or breaking the rules, political forces that are pandering to demagoguery. And we are all experiencing a rise of disinformation, some state-sponsored, some politically motivated, that twists facts and refuses evidence and science. In this era of uncertainty and of resurgent great power competition, rules are what will protect us. And it's not enough for them to just be written down somewhere. We must advocate for them, stand up for them, and live by them. History will judge us on how we defend democratic values. And Ukraine is at the tip of the spear in this great challenge of the 21st century. That's why Canada and Canadians are there for Ukraine, and why we stand so unequivocally against Russia. It's why people across Canada have welcomed with open arms over 175,000 Ukrainians, some of whom are here with us today. There are those here who've come from Bucha and Kharkiv. They are part of a group of Ukrainian scientists who found safety in Canada, and their expertise in the clean economy is helping the world unwind its dependence on the fossil fuels weaponized by despots like Putin. We also have leaders from the Ukrainian-Canadian community like Orysia and others. They come from the Canadian prairies, where so many Ukrainian immigrants have settled for over a century, and they have led the charge in helping their communities welcome refugees fleeing Putin's bombs, everything from collecting clothing donations to helping them find homes. We're also joined by Agnes and Susan, who lost their brother Anthony, a humanitarian volunteer, just 12 days ago. He was killed in a Russian strike while trying to help civilians in Donetsk Oblast, innocent people who are being brutalized by the Kremlin's unprovoked aggression. Today, our gallery is filled with Ukrainians who've come to show their support and gratitude for you, Volodymyr, but I think we all need to take a moment to thank them for their bravery, their generosity, and their solidarity with the values of democracy.
President Zelenskyy, I have clearly said that our government will stand by you for as long as it takes. Canada has provided nearly $9 billion in military, financial, and humanitarian support to Ukraine since Putin began his war of aggression.
Today, we are making a longer-term, multi-year commitment that provides predictable, steady support to Ukraine. It will include $650 million over 3 years for 50 armored vehicles, including medical evacuation vehicles that will be built by Canadian workers in London, Ontario. We'll also send F-16 trainers for pilots and for maintenance so Ukrainians are able to maximize their use of donated fighter jets. We
will continue to work with our partners, including within NATO, to provide unwavering support, and we will continue to provide economic support to Ukraine over the next year so that it remains a strong, dynamic, and prosperous democratic country. But our greatest hope is that you won't need military or financial support for long, and that peace returns soon. But it cannot be a false peace based on a compromise imposed by the aggressor. For a lasting peace, we must oppose Putin and reject his attempts to bring us back to a time when might made right. A lasting peace must clearly establish that borders must be respected, regardless of the size of the neighboring army. This peace must restore the right of Ukrainians to determine their own future.
Canada stands with the principles of Ukraine's peace formula. We believe that peace must respect the UN Charter, be based in international law, and preserve Ukraine's territorial integrity. This is the peace we must fight for, and that is what Ukraine has done for 1 year, 6 months, and 29 days. Putin thought he'd make quick work of marching on Kyiv. Putin thought President Zelensky would cave in the face of personal peril. But, sir, you have not. You have galvanized the world. You have made the bonds between democratic allies and friends stronger than ever. Volodymyr, Olena, to see you here today in this chamber, to see so many proud and courageous Ukrainians here today, after everything you have all endured, is a testament to the commitment of your country and the strength of your fight. Monsieur le Président Zelensky,
President Zelensky, you have shown the rest of the world true leadership, even in the most difficult moments. You fight with a sense of hope, and you are dedicated to the security and progress of your people.
In times like this, the world needs leaders who understand that true strength is not about wielding power, but about empowering others. True strength is not about crushing your opponent with brute force and lies. It's about respecting the humanity and the dignity of everyone. It's about governing from a basis of truth and compassion. In times of crisis, holding fast to positive values like this can be a lot harder than resorting to fear and resentment, but it is well worth it. When the history books are written, we know what they will say of you. That you were among those who stood up for their principles, no matter how hard. Among those who stood up to bullies. Among those who protected the less fortunate. Among those who unified people in the face of fear. Among those who defended the rules and upheld the law. Among those who put justice, hope, and freedom above all else. We know that democracy is one of the greatest expressions of freedom. It gives us the right to have a voice, to choose our own future, to be protected by a system with justice and accountability. But democracy does not happen by accident, and it will not continue without effort. We must defend it and strengthen it with all that we have. Volodymyr, my friend, you have a unique understanding of this. You stare down Putin every single day. And we will be with you and all heroes of this courageous fight for as long as it takes. Slava Ukraini!
Glory to Ukraine!
Mr. Speaker, it is now my distinct honor to welcome President Volodymyr Zelenskyy of Ukraine to address this House.
Thank you so much. Героям слава! Героям слава! Glory to heroes. Thank you so much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Canada. Before I start, I just want to remind one thing. This thing is very important to understand both Ukraine and Canada. And what we are up to, what we need to do, and to do together. 1983, the city of Edmonton. Its history is closely linked to the destiny of Ukraine and Ukrainian Canadian community. That here in Edmonton, the first monument to the victims of Holodomor was built in the world. Thank you so much. Thank you. Was built to remember the genocide against the Ukrainian people, the genocide ordered and perpetrated by Moscow, the first ever Holodomor monument in the world. At that time, Ukraine didn't yet have memorials commemorating the victims of genocide of Ukrainians because Ukraine was under Moscow's control back then. This fall will mark the 40th anniversary since that first and very important commemoration of the victims of Holodomor. A lot has changed since then. Ukraine gained independence. Ukraine is restoring its own historic memory. Dozens of other countries, their parliaments, their governments have already recognized Holodomor as the genocide of the Ukrainian people. And this year alone, there have been 11 of such recognitions. And I'm sure that the whole world, will recognize the truth about Holodomor. But there is something that has not changed either in 40 years since the monument in Edmonton was built or in 90 years since the Holodomor. Moscow now, as always, is bent on controlling Ukraine and makes use of all available means to do that, including genocide. It is genocide what Russian occupiers are doing to Ukraine. And when we want to win, when we call on the world to support us, it is not just about an ordinary conflict. It is about saving lives of millions of people. Literally, physical salvation. Ordinary women and men, children, our families, whole communities, entire cities. Russia's destruction of Mariupol, of Volnovakha, or Bakhmut, or any other city or village in Ukraine must not go unpunished. Life and justice must prevail everywhere in Ukraine and for all Ukrainians. This Russian aggression must end with our victory. Yes. Yes. So that Russia will never bring back genocide to Ukraine and will never ever try to do so. Moscow must lose once and for all, and it will lose. Dear speakers, the whole Parliament of Canada, dear Justin, Mr. Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen of the government, dear representatives of all the communities and cities, all citizens of Canada. In my opinion, one of the most startling qualities of your country is that justice is not an empty word for Canada. Another extremely important fact about you is that you never, ever make a political bet on hatred and enmity. And you are always on the bright side of history. Thank you. That's to you. Thank you so much. During the First World War and in the time between those terrible wars, and during the Second World War, and during the Cold War, you always defended freedom. You have always defended justice. And I had no doubt that you would choose the side of freedom and justice when Russia launched a full-scale war against Ukraine. Thank you. But it is never enough only to choose the right side. You also need to be able to be a leader on the side, and you do. You are a leader, and I thank you for that, Canada. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your political support for Ukraine. And this is truly support of a leader. And it is global in scale. Because when you are fighting for something, when you are fighting for good, in human nature, the false neutrality looks obviously immoral. When one sees true leaders, all others who are afraid to be real, to speak out, to fight, have only two opinions: to change or to be looked down. And I thank you, Canada, for being a real example of leadership and honesty for so many around the world, an example that inspires others to defend life. Canada's support for Ukraine with weapons and equipment has allowed us to save thousands of lives. This includes air defense systems, armored vehicles, artillery shells, and very significant assistance in demining. Thank you so much. Canada's leadership in sanctions against Russia for this war and terror really encouraged others in the world to follow your lead. And I'm especially grateful for your extremely strong 100% leadership support of the Ukrainian movement to NATO. For your strong participation in training our soldiers. It's very important. It's already a tradition that Canada trains those who defend the world. Thousands. Yes. Thousands and thousands of pilots during the Second World War, thousands of Ukrainians now, and this is what makes victory strong, victory indispensable, training. Thank you for this. Thank you for your economic support, for helping Ukraine to get rid of its dependence on Russian nuclear fuel. And this is progress, not only for us, really, Ukraine and Canada together with their partners and really friends are demonstrating to everyone that it is quite realistic to completely cut off our ties with dubious Russian nuclear technologies, in addition to be purely technological danger. The Russian nuclear industry also serves Moscow's political expansion. Russia uses nuclear technology and construction of nuclear power plants like gas and oil for political attacks against the sovereignty of other nations. Russia is trying to break the sovereignty of others through its manipulation of energy resources, all energy resources. So the more nations are free from Russian energy resources, the sooner energy in the world will once again become just an energy resource. Not a weapon. Not a weapon against sovereignties. Another important area of our cooperation, literally justice. Today, in talks with Prime Minister, with Justin, we discussed the Canadian initiative for the G7 to set up efforts to confiscate Russian assets. those funds that Russia and its henchmen used to pay for their war to be used to fairly compensate for the damage caused by war and terror. Active and global work is also required to bring Russia to justice for the crime of aggression itself and for absolutely all crimes from this aggression. All deaths, every deportation of every child, every adult, every life needs to be protected. And every attacked nation needs justice to rule. The world needs it too, so that other potential aggressors can see that war ends in verdicts for the aggressor. And I urge you, Canada, to extend your ability to lead to other countries, especially in this matter of justice, of prosecuting the aggression, of compensation for aggression, of making the aggressor feel how strong justice is. And most of all, I would like to thank you, Canada, for the purely human thing, for making Ukrainians feel at home when they are here in Canada. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And this is, you know, this is not just a legacy of history, this is a legacy of character. The Ukrainian-Canadian community is about millions of Ukrainian destinies that have become the destiny of Canada with all its diversity of communities. Freedom, loving, courage, our special inner call for justice. The ability of our people to share comfort wherever they go, to build and create, not to ruin or humiliate. Ukrainian flags in Canada are a part of everyday life as absolute trust to Canada in Ukraine. In fact, such proximity provides many answers, including answers to the question about this war. Can we give up? No. Can we betray the good in human nature? No. Can we agree to evil? No. Can we allow our identity to be erased? No. Ukraine and Canada are the same. We stand and we fight for life. Ukraine, not genocide, will be victorious in this war. People will be the winners, not the Kremlin. Freedom will be the winner. Justice will be the winner. You can know this for sure about us, because you know for sure about yourself that you would never submit to evil. Je te remercie, Canada.
Thank you, Canada.
And may one day soon a monument be built in maybe Edmonton. As in other cities of the world and in the cities of Ukraine, to honor the victory of our people in this war. our common victory with you, the people of Canada, with all your communities, with all your legacy of good. Ladies and gentlemen, today me and my beautiful First Lady really had the honor of meeting with the Governor General of Canada, Honorable Mary Simon, and she taught me a word from her mother tongue. Ayuinata. Ayuinata. She said the meaning of this word is don't give up, stay strong against all odds. And so shall it be. Ayuinata, Canada. Ayuinata, Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!
Well, you're watching President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in the House of Commons receiving a rousing standing ovation from politicians on both sides for his first visit to Ottawa. And this comes after Canada announcing they're going to be giving $650 million over the next couple of years to support Ukraine's military in their ongoing conflict with Russia. That includes 2 tanks. Zelenskyy telling politicians there and everyone watching this live on CB24 that what Russia is doing amounts to what he says is genocide, and it cannot go unpunished. He also thanked the Canadian people for helping the Ukrainians feel at home, the many that have sought refuge here in this country. Before this, Prime Minister Trudeau goes on to say that everybody's dealing with this conflict and calls it something of a generational scale. We're going to continue to listen here live in Ottawa, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's first visit to the House of Commons.
Monsieur le Président,
President,
Madame Zelenskyy,
Ms.
Premier
Zelenskyy,
Ministre Trudeau,
Prime Minister
Président
Trudeau,
Rota,
Speaker
chers
Rota,
parlementaires,
dear parliamentarians,
éminents invités,
distinguished guests,
Mesdames et Messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen,
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
c'est un
President,
grand honneur
it is
et
a
un
great
réel
honor
privilège
and
pour
a
moi
real
de vous
privilege for
remercier
me
de vos
to thank
paroles
you
très
for your very
puissantes
powerful
et très
and very
inspirantes.
inspiring words.
Nous sommes tous
We are
et
all
toutes honorés de
honored
votre présence.
by your presence.
La dernière
The
fois
last
que
time
vous
you
êtes
addressed
adressé à
this
ce Parlement,
Parliament,
quelques
just a
semaines à
few
peine,
weeks
suivant
after
l'assaut
Russia's
généralisé de
full-scale
votre pays
assault
par la
on your
Russie,
country,
vous nous aviez
you implored
supplié
us to
d'imaginer
imagine
ce que
what the
ressentait le
Ukrainian
peuple
people were
ukrainien,
feeling,
d'imaginer
to
ce que c'est
imagine
d'être
what it's like to be
bombardé
bombed
et envahi
and
sans
invaded
provocation,
without provocation,
d'imaginer ce
to
que l'on
imagine what it
ressent
feels like
quand on
to
comprend la
understand the
signification
meaning
de
of the
l'invasion,
invasion,
c'est-à-dire que la
that
Russie
Russia
n'attaquait
was
pas
not only
uniquement le
attacking
territoire
Ukrainian
ukrainien,
territory,
mais aussi
but also
sa
its
souveraineté
very
même.
sovereignty.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
je peux
President,
dire
I can
sans
say
hésiter
without
que
hesitation
nous vous avons
that we
entendu.
have heard you.
Vos paroles
Your
ont
words have
résonné
echoed
dans les
in
chambres
the chambers
de notre
of our
Parlement,
Parliament,
dans nos
in
salles
our
de
committee
comité
rooms
et nos
and
bureaux,
offices,
et aux
and
quatre
all
coins de
across
notre
our
grand
great
pays.
country.
Shortly after I became Speaker of the Senate of Canada, I was asked about the importance of role models and I expressed my belief that if you see it, you can be it. Mr. President, a new generation is seeing you. Having worked with young people in the field of education for over 35 years, and as a mother of 2 male adult children, I am heartened by the model you are showing. Young people around the world are seeing that a democratically elected voice is the real form of power.
Mr. President, for more than 18 months, you have been the epitome of the people's mobilization and a source of inspiration for the world. Whether you were speaking from a bunker or behind a podium, in a meeting room or on the front line, you never gave up. You never gave up, wavered, or hesitated, embodying the spirit and resilience of the Ukrainian people. I'm certainly not the first to mention it, but who could forget February 25th, 2022? You were in the center of Kyiv, the target of the Russian invader. It was one of the most perilous and uncertain moments of the war, and you had one strong message to convey. We are here.
Your people have carried forward this resolve at Hostomel, at Kharkiv, and beyond. While we draw inspiration from their stories, we also recognize the realities Ukrainians have faced. Withstanding thousands of artillery rounds every day, grieving the unrelenting loss of family, loved ones, colleagues, and neighbors, patiently working through treacherous minefields while drones circle overhead, defending against waves of attacks on civilian infrastructure, and taking steps where and when they can to recover and rebuild. Mr. President, your people's resilience in the face of such aggression compels the international community, in your now famous words, to be here for Ukraine, however long it takes. And our message today, which you can bring back to your people, is equally clear. The Canadian people stand with Ukraine. We aren't going anywhere.
On behalf of all senators, of all members of the House of Commons, and no doubt of all Canadians, I thank you once again for your courage and your determination, and for your inspiring words to Canadians and to the entire world today.
Slava Ukraini!
Glory to Ukraine!
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mr. President, Monsieur le Premier Ministre.
Mr. Prime Minister.
Mr. President, as has been noted today, you join a very small group of world leaders who have addressed a joint session of our Parliament for a second time. Among those leaders, one stands out for his oratory, his leadership in the face of adversity, and his strong determination to fight on behalf of his people and on behalf of what is right. That leader was the late African president and Nobel Peace Prize winner, Nelson Mandela. In his first address to the joint session of our parliament, Nelson Mandela said of the Canadian people, and I quote, "They are like us, like brothers and sisters, from whose warm embrace we shall never be parted." Mr. President, I want you to know that we feel like that still with Ukraine. Je suis convaincu.
I'm confident that you'll share the same conviction after your visit today, Mr. President. Indeed, beyond metaphor, the ties between Canada and Ukraine are above all family ties, ties between our two peoples strengthened by the Ukrainian-Canadian community, which totals 1.3 million people.
Your words today also remind us of another world leader who addressed both our houses during the time of war. In December 1941, during World War II, the British Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill, traveled to Ottawa and delivered an impassioned speech on behalf of his people to rally for the continued support for his country at war. It was a defining moment of history, and one that must never be
That's
forgotten.
Speaker of the House of Commons, Anthony Rota, speaking to President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, comparing him to Winston Churchill in terms of the short list of world leaders to visit Ottawa in a time of war. This is Zelenskyy's first trip to Ottawa since the 18-month conflict between Russia began.